There are many decisions one must make when out at a gay bar on a Saturday night in college. Across the dance floor, bodies in various degrees of coordination and inebriation are illuminated with the flashes of lights as a DJ remixes a song you love into a song you just like. I mean, should I get another drink? I dislike this song. Should I go outside for some air? How much do I want to smell like sweat tomorrow morning? How much do I want to remember tonight? Are they flirting with me? Uh, oh, they're flirting with me. How do I escape? Now, some decisions open doors to future decisions, a cascade of possibilities or consequences piling atop like bodies on a dance floor, the outcome of which is usually dependent on the meeting of sober personalities in the hours or days to come. For me, these Saturday nights came with one perennial decision. At what hour of the night, or if I'm honest, early morning, would I leave my friends, sometimes boyfriends, to head back home, not having another? So that when the morning came, or rather when the alarm sounded, that I could get ready, jump on the bus, and be the right level of presentable at church the next morning. Usually I would head out alone, which I didn't really mind, really. It wasn't a choice I regretted making, even if I begrudged being part of a community that only seemed to begin having a good time after midnight. Most of my friends got used to my early departures. Even as the quizzical expressions remained, they didn't get it. Which made sense to me because sometimes I didn't get it either. Get what was so compelling to me, that would pull me away from the youthful frivolity and freedom of the gay bar, a place that often formed the home base away from often hateful messages of organized religion, to ride the bus 1 hour each way to the Unitarian church in the burbs. It definitely wasn't the classical music, beautiful for sure, but not compelling enough. It wasn't the coffee hour conversation, was never exactly sure what to say or what to do with my hands. It wasn't the sermons, which were hit and miss. I mean, no shade. If you bat higher than that, you're doing really well in my books. What was so compelling to pull me away? To build a habit so against the flow of my generation's general ambivalence towards religion, and especially to attend a decidedly not hip, sort of stodgy boomer congregation with no band or pastor in skinny jeans, where the average person was legitimately 50 years my senior. Essentially, the question is, why church? Well, my answer to this perennial question has always been because church. There's no one answer. The answers are like stars that spiral, forming new constellation in new seasons of life, helping to navigate one to the next destination in life's journey. Why church? Because church. It's the casserole reflex. That when the church ladies hear the news of diagnoses, of accidents, of looming crisis, or any one of the many body blows of life, that somehow, before even processing it fully, the casserole dish is already in the oven, a meal ready to be delivered, an instinct to care just baked in. Why? Because church. The same reflex that taught me that when certain events happen, you don't call, you go. You show up. That when tragedy strikes, when all might seem lost, you don't call, you go. You show up, awkwardly, sure, uncomfortably sometimes. I've witnessed friendships formed in our social hall, sparked in classes and coffee hour, that have been life-saving, and I am not exaggerating. Because someone decided that you were worth showing up for, even when it gets hard. It might have started over a stupid icebreaker question, someone risking introducing themselves, another person stumbling over their words, and another offering a forgiving smile. It's a caring listener hearing about the fall, the upcoming surgery, the divorce, and reaching out. And even when their offers of support went unanswered, it still conveyed a cardinal truth that you are not alone. You may think it, you may feel it, but it's not the truth. Take this text, this casserole, this voicemail as evidence of such, that it's not the end of the story. Why? Because church. In his contribution to the book Testimony, Unitarian Universalist Minister Reverend Manish Mishra-Marzetti wrote about the literal life-changing experience of a hug. He had long come to terms with being gay, but after attending a friend's gorgeous Indian wedding, Manish broke down in the car ride home, his partner perplexed, trying to understand what was going on. "It was just so beautiful," he wrote. All the family and friends, the religious community that had turned up to celebrate her marriage, I just don't know. Where would we ever get married? Who would come? Who would officiate? And not just a wedding, but what about when we die? Would any community show up for us? Would any community be there? The wedding had brought alive within him a stark and painful reality that his spiritual but not religious path had ended up a loner path, a path devoid of spiritual community. Yes, he had a community of friends, but what he had seen and experienced that evening was different. It was a community of like-valued, like-minded individuals, grounded in ancient traditions, rituals, and symbols, coming together to honor and to celebrate one of their own. It was this realization that led him to a Unitarian Universalist church. Hopefully, he thought this was a place where his queer and Hindu roots would be affirmed. When he wrote about this experience, he described it as such, and maybe you'll find this familiar. As the service moved towards its conclusion, I remember clearly thinking, well, the content's okay, but this was probably a mistake. I'm sure they don't really want us here. I resolved that as soon as the service ended, my partner and I would immediately head out the back door. No need to prolong this nerve-wracking experience. The service ended, I grabbed my partner's hand, and out we headed, down the church's central aisle towards the back doors, until, that is, one of the grannies, in a row behind us, shoved her walker into the aisle, blocking my way. She got out, looked at me, reached out over her walker, and embraced me in a hug, whispering in my ear, "I am so glad you're here in our community. Welcome." It was all I could do not to burst into tears right then and there, and still decades later, I weep at remembering how welcome and how loved she made me feel. To me, it was radical hospitality embodied. Every fear I had about elders not accepting gays and lesbians vanished. It was as if my own grandmother were hugging me and welcoming me home. Why? Because church. Because we are humans. We need to belong, need to be reminded of our belonging in the great web of life of which we are a beloved part. The depth of that belonging cannot truly be embodied with a shallow embrace, an embrace of parts of ourselves to the exclusion of others, an embrace that aims to change or cure, but a full embrace that conveys the truth that if universal salvation is true for all of us, that it's true for all parts of us too. That all the parts of you, the questioning parts, the doubting parts, the wondering parts, the cynical parts are not only welcome, but necessary here. All the questions and existential angst I had as a kid that were funneled into all manner of enterprises to try to make sense of life were welcomed. That there was enough space in the embrace for it. But the depth of this embrace, well, it extends further. It's a temporal embrace, an embrace with one arm ancestral and the other futuristic, converging together, weaving you within a fabric of belonging that puts you in a history, a belongingness of past and future, of our belonging, for our belonging is as ancestral as it is futuristic. When Manish was embraced in that moment, it wasn't simply one woman in one moment. It was the embrace of an the entire ancestry of Unitarian Universalists, every church member and fellow traveler, every person who committed to every justice endeavor, every member of the building and grounds crew of that church, every youth who grew up, moved away, and came back or didn't, every past misdeed and every future foray. A complex embrace holding as much pain as potential, a belonging that grounds and orients us into time itself, a belonging that says you were a part of this unfolding story, the end of which has not been written, but we relish the thought of you as one of us, and here we will face it, not alone or unarmed. For we have stories and practices, rituals and tools and ideas and baggage. You don't have to strike out on your own. You don't need to make it up all by yourself and look around. You don't have to do it alone either. The embrace I received as a lonely teenage Buddhist attending his first UU worship service, a pride service nonetheless, that I felt overcome with the sense of I have a people now. Why? Because church. In a society that tells me I have to be self-made, I relish the message of a church that tells me that I exist because we are. For if the choice were independence or interdependence, there is no question I would choose the gnarly path if we can go together. And it is gnarlier. Churches are human, beautifully broken. Conflict emerges, perspectives differ, be it about the music or the minister or even that new coat of paint. People leave the faith, leave the church to attend another, and new people arrive, and that's okay. It can be a painful moment, a tear-filled moment, when you look around and don't recognize anyone anymore and wonder if that must mean that you don't belong here either. It will be true that the church you join will not be the same church you leave, be it from heartbreak or death, or simply moving away for a season or for the rest of your life. For it was changed by your very presence and the very presence of every other person who passes through. And that's the beauty too. The choice between stagnant or growing, evolving or dying. Well, static truth stagnates, and the same is true for churches. It's the beauty of seeing the child dedicated in the arms of their family one moment, the next striking out, testing their capabilities of their body, clambering up chairs during the service, distracting people from the words, but reminding us of our true purpose. It's the growing we do as we navigate the challenges of a mission that calls us to the brink of all that we love and know and invites us, nay, commands us to step out in faith, to commit to be changed, to covenant, to promise to a journey which we cannot know what intimacy or vulnerability will be asked of us as we embark. For we wouldn't have said yes, but looking back, we can't help but thank God we did. There is so much that changes in the life of the church. The music stylings of generations come and go, the languages and words of reverence shift, but even as it's evolving around its sights and sounds, it revolves always around its core, which is the determination of love to break forth. For as the Unitarian Theodore Parker preached back in the 19th century, religious forms may be useful and beautiful. They are so whenever they speak to the soul and answer a want thereof. In our present state, some forms are perhaps necessary, but they are only the accident of the church, not its substance. They are the robe, not the angel, who may take on another robe quite as becoming and useful. Why? Because church. It's the 85-year-olds who, when the pandemic hit, became Zoom experts overnight and taught others, casting off the robe of a physical sanctuary for a digital cathedral, knowing that church was never a place but a people. It's the Zoom chat on Sundays filling up with prayer, heartfelt messages, launched not into a void like rockets into space, but as offerings of compassion gently drifting into the heart center of a community that still breathes, still conspires, found between and beyond the ones and zeros that constitute the gathered place, even as it confounds those binaries. Because even though each and every church I have attended has been far from perfect, and I confess that there have been times in each of them that I haven't even liked them very much, which led me to sometimes drifting in mind or body. I testify that every time I showed up, I surprised myself over and over that I could find love in broken people and in hopeless places. That even as certain people grated on me, my push to act was tempered, their perspectives at odds with mine. Like sandpaper, they wore down my rough places, granting me a venue to practice much needed patience, compassion, forgiveness, and humility, giving me the chance to practice being human because, well, it takes practice to human these days, or, well, any days. Why? Because church. Because in church, I found teams of people striking out to feed and house our neighbors, to dismantle the prisons of supremacy that live within, to seek to make belovedness real, to make real a commitment to our blue boat home. Why? Because church. This last week, we wrapped up Despair Club, this gathering of despair warriors who embarked on a 3-week mission to learn from and lessen the negative effects of despair within our lives. We gathered for our last session, and after reflecting in smaller groups about the experience, we returned to the big group on Zoom. I shared a Google Doc and invited everyone to type their reflections and insights, hard won in the trenches. The blank Google Doc came alive with cursors. Hesitantly and boldly, typing their insights about despair and the practices that loosened its grip upon their lives. And as it was happening, I had this profound realization, maybe even a revelation, that church is a Google Doc of life. A canvas ready for dozens of editors, all adding their pieces of the truths to a larger mosaic of understanding. Bring your life, it beckons. Together we will put it through the fires of contemplation and the companionship of community and add it to our ever-growing, ever-evolving articulation of these questions of living. For each of us, with insights that were forged not in isolation but in community, offered with typos, awkward formatting, and even with contradictions. When one person's experience of life butts up against another, creatively, beautifully, pluralistically creating a tension that tells us about a truth of life itself. Offered each of these, the harvest of our life, offered up for the sustenance of others without expectation. Maybe this, too, is church. What a beautiful thing it is. Now, I am about to embark on a sabbatical. The first time since I was 16 that I will not regularly be a part of a church community. I won't be here on Sundays. I won't get to hear all that is going on in this beautifully diverse and complex community. I'm going to miss it. I'm going to miss you. But also I trust. Church is bigger than any one of us. Church is about something larger than any one of us, minister or member, newcomer or child. Church is about that determination of love to break through in the most surprising ways. And I can't wait to come back and be surprised and delighted and to fall in love again with who we are. Amen, and blessed be.